Happy New Year, Madison Hills. You feeling good about 2024 so far? Good week for you so far? Okay, all right. Well, I'm excited about it. You know, we've had our own junk we want to leave in 2023, not take that in 2024. So I'm excited for this new series, and I hope what we can do is spend a month in an Old Testament book called Nehemiah. And I hope that we can plug into this book and see that every single one of us, I bet and I assume, needs some form of redo. And I don't know if you're into football or not, but did you happen to catch the game last night? Anybody into football? It was in the background for like the first three quarters, and I call a little the fourth quarter. Houston's playing Indianapolis. It's about 4 minutes left, and something the announcer says just catches my attention. So glance at the TV, scores 23-17. Indianapolis is down. They have the ball, and they're driving down the field. And if you're not into football, just hold tight with me for a second, okay? So they're running their plays. They're trying to move the ball down the field, and they're just pushing it, and they're running the ball every single play. They're running the ball to the point to where the announcers are like, they keep running the ball. They're not going for the pass option, and it's the same dude. They're just pushing the ball down the field as much as they can. Sometimes they get a couple of yards, sometimes 3 or 4. It goes to fourth down. Luckily, they get it. They keep moving forward. Well, the clock's running down. There's a few seconds left. They're about 10, 15 yards out. They come back. It's fourth down. If they lose, it's one of those games. If you win, you're in the playoffs. If you clinch your spot, if you lose, you're out. Season's over. It's fourth down. They've been driving this ball with the run play for play after play after play for several minutes. They get on the line. They call the play. It confuses everybody on Houston's team. Me too. I'm thinking they're going to run it, right? They're going to get this. So dude goes over to the left, and you see him look back, and he's wide open. And the dude throws the ball, and it's like, if he catches this, he's going to get the first down. They've got a few more seconds on the clock, but he's going to make some progress. He may even, with a good spin move, break somebody's ankles. He may get into the end zone. I mean, this is going to be a phenomenal ending of this game. And he drops it. And that's why he ends up on the field like this right here. Drops it. And he's flat prone on the field. And he stays there for a few moments. The announcers are in disbelief. The cameras pan to the fans, and they're in shock. Their season's over, and you see them crying. And can you imagine just laying there on the field how this dude felt? Thinking about going back to the locker room. Thinking about waking up this morning and all the talk radio shows. This is the sports headline, I guarantee you. I got this photo last night. So it's untelling what's going on. And I bet this guy, Goodman, would give anything for a redo. He dropped the ball. So when you dip back into the Old Testament and you open this book called Nehemiah, Nehemiah comes on the scene, and Jerusalem has dropped the ball. And Jerusalem is lying flat on the field. You see, at this time in the history of God's redemptive purposes, he reaches into a kingdom that he calls Israel. And if you're a perceptive reader, then you'll see that at this time in history, Israel is actually a split kingdom. And Israel is the kingdom of the north, and Judah is the kingdom of the south. And in the north, the capital is Samaria, and in the south, the capital is Jerusalem. Well, Israel had strayed. She had dropped the ball with her covenant with her beautiful God. And God had sent prophets saying, hey, listen, get this, focus, catch this, bring it home, don't stray, come back to me, because if you don't, there are enemies from the north and the south coming and preparing to invade your land. And if you reject me, then you will not be ready to rely upon me in those moments, and destruction is coming your way. So after the kingdom splits a couple of hundred years later, Assyria comes in and they just level Samaria. A few centuries go by, the same pattern unfolds. Israel dropped the ball with her covenant with her God, and Babylon comes into the south and decimates Jerusalem. They destroy this wall that surrounds the city. So Nehemiah, he hears about this. And you open the first chapter, Nehemiah asks, how are things going in Jerusalem? Because Babylon comes in, levels the wall, they take some captives into exile. And this is like the ongoing narrative, the story, the headlines, day after day, and people are keeping up with it, kind of like we're keeping up with what's going on in the Middle East or with Russia and Ukraine, seeing the developments, what's going on with Israel. It's just posted every day. So Nehemiah gets word, and nothing's changed. And it bothers him. It's kind of like when I call back home and I talk to one of my parents, I'm like, hey, how are things going on in Harlan? And then they'll drop a name of something that has went south in somebody's life or something's happening. And I'm like, oh, that just bothers me because those are my people. I grew up there. I know the names. I know the area. I know the culture. And when something goes south like that, it bothers me. So Nehemiah hears that this happened. He knows it happened. And then it's just stayed the same. Nothing's changed. And it bothers him. So just like Goodman and just like Jerusalem, when you think about Nehemiah and you think about you, I bet some of us, and maybe a good portion of us in here this morning, we've dropped the ball. And we would give anything for a redo. You know, that mistake and that missed opportunity and that moment you feel like you will never get back. Notice this language, how Nehemiah opens. Nehemiah asks about the exiles, and then he gets word that, oh yeah, there's trouble. You see that in the text? There's trouble. The wall's leveled, and Jerusalem is in disgrace. The wall is broken down, burned. You ever feel that way? There's trouble and disgrace, broken down, burned, and you'd give anything for a redo. Well, I've got good news for you. If that's you and this idea of redo really connects with you, I want you to know something. I believe this to my core, and I've had some conversations with several of you, and I know that most of you are just like me this morning. You want 2024 to be the most God-honoring year of your life to date. Well, I will tell you that if there is anything that's God-honoring and worthy of our attention, any attempt that's worthy of our attention and that will honor God, it is a fair shot at a redo. God is behind the idea of redo, and we're going to see that over the next several weeks with Nehemiah. But to do a redo, you've kind of got to identify what it is you need to redo, right? So with that prefix, it actually means again. So when you redo, you do something again. And some of you need to solve something again. And some of you need to count something again. And some of you need to write something again. There's something that happened and you need to go at it again. And God is going to be involved in the mix. So we can pick up the ball, we can pick ourselves up from laying flat on the field and say, God, I believe you're in this, and I want to move forward with you guiding. That's Nehemiah. That's the story of Nehemiah. And as we go forward with Nehemiah and we understand how it applies to your life, and your life, and your life, and then the life of Madison Hills Christian Church, I've got to get you with a good working understanding of two words. And we'll flesh these terms out over the next several weeks. But I've got to make sure that you have a good working understanding of these two words. And the first word is mission. Now, raise your hand. Don't answer out loud or anything like that. But raise your hand if you've got a good working understanding of mission when it comes to the idea of church. Like in the church world, when we throw out the word mission, do you feel like you've got a good working understanding of what it is and what we're talking about? Okay, so with mission, when you're talking about mission, you're actually talking about what? You're not talking about how, you're not talking about why, you're not talking about where, you're talking about what, and that is with Nehemiah. So Nehemiah is going to have this what that comes into his life, and it's actually going to consume his time, energy, and attention. And when you read through Nehemiah, this what, it stays. It never changes. It never shifts. And that is a definition of mission. When you're thinking about the word mission in a church should identify the idea of mission. They should understand that this is what we are about. This is what we do. And the caveat with a mission is that it never changes. If the mission changes, then the actual nature of the church or the organization changes, because what you're doing is now something else. That's why you hear a lot of churches say, oh, our mission is to make disciples who make disciples. Well, that will never change in that church. That's what they will be about. And everything that they do will flow from or back into that mission. So when they have an event, it will be geared toward, whether it's fun, entertaining, or what, it will be geared toward building into discipleship and making disciples. Make sense? So also with a mission, it's very short, like make disciples who make disciples. It's very short, it's very brief. It's like it passes the t-shirt contest. You ever heard of that? If you can fit it on a t-shirt, then it's going to be kind of concise and clear and easily worded, simple, and you know it. So a mission should pass the t-shirt test. You hear it a couple of times, you know what it is. What? Now I got a question for you coming up. Before we get there, here's how this plays out in Nehemiah. So this wrecks Nehemiah that Jerusalem has dropped the ball, and he wants to do something about it, and he believes that God is actually saying, Nehemiah, I want you to do something about this. So he spends some time in prayer, and the whole first chapter is about Nehemiah praying and repenting and getting clear in his heart and mind. And then he goes to his boss, who is actually the king, and he's like, hey, I need you to help me. This is what's going on, and I need you to help me with the resources and the funds to make it happen. And they have this really neat exchange about how much time it's going to take and the effort involved and when he'll be back and the leave of absence and all that stuff. So they get those details worked out, and then Nehemiah goes into Jerusalem. So before he does that, the king says this right here. He says, what is it that you want? What is it that you want? So they're having this beautiful conversation about what Nehemiah is going to do, and the question for the king is, what? And that's where Nehemiah gets in touch with his mission. So he responds and he says, well, this is going on, the wall is leveled, all of this is in Jerusalem's in disgrace, my people are struggling, all this. I want to rebuild it. It was built, then Jerusalem dropped the ball, and now it's time to again build it, rebuild this wall, and that's what Nehemiah wants to do. Clear on that so far? So when you read through Nehemiah, this is what Nehemiah is all about, and it doesn't shift. So my question for you is, what is the mission at Madison Hills? Don't answer out loud. I just want you to think. What is the mission at Madison Hills? And if you're drawing a blank, that's okay. I remember being involved in the search team about 6 months ago. Well, about 8 months now, time flies. So being involved with the search team when you all were looking for a new pastor, and we're having these conversations, and we're sitting around the table in the UTX, and you're telling me a little bit about the history of the church, and I'm listening to this, and you're sharing stories, and we're talking about where you want to go, what you want to be about, some of the struggles you've had, some of the good things that are part of Madison Hills. And I remember sitting at this table just listening to people share, and I keep thinking, oh, this is simply an identity issue. What we need to do over the next 6 to 12 months at Madison Hills is form a fresh mission to define what it is we're about here at Madison Hills. To be able to identify this is what Madison Hills exists for. This is why Madison Hills exists at 960 Red House Road. This is our what. So when you come to Madison Hills, you know what you're a part of. Make sense? Now I ask you the question, what is our mission? Not to throw punches and not to get you like, aha, caught you, you don't know. But simply to identify when you study churches throughout America, one of the core characteristics of a church that plateaus and then starts to decline is that they never sort out what they're about. That's very interesting to me, especially since Nehemiah, right up front, that's settled. What do you want, Nehemiah? I want to rebuild the wall. So when I think about Madison Hills, and I think about us turning 40 this year, I think about Madison Hills Christian Church. What is our mission? And we'll define that over the next few weeks. But I have to tell you, being involved in conversations with you, knowing my heart, what's going on, why God brought us together, I want to rebuild this place. And the time is right. It feels so good at Madison Hills right now. So the second word I want you to hear is vision. And those two things are drastically different. So mission, it's very brief and it never changes. Well, vision, you can cast a vision and then sometime in the future, that can actually be fulfilled. That can be completed, which is why you can have another vision that follows. It's kind of a temporary thing. And mission is this thing that's going to stick and always be. But vision, you can fulfill this thing. And vision is a little more lengthy, if you will. But I love what happens with Nehemiah as this story unfolds and how he gets clear with the vision and how he introduces people to it and gets them involved with it. But before I do, my daughter this past week, she turned 16. Look at that smile. That smile has nothing to do with me. That smile has to do with passing her permit test and driving. She is so excited to be on the roads. I was hesitant. She wanted to go out driving a couple of days ago. And Michelle said, you know what? I'll let her drive. We got to take our dog to get a couple of shots. I'll let her drive. And I'm like, hey, what roads are you going to be on? Because she doesn't have a lot of experience yet. And I would hate for this to go south with her and her be involved in an accident, cause an accident up front. She was like, well, there's some bigger roads in Lexington, that we've got to be on. And I'm like, well, let's do this. Let me spend a little time with her. So the next day I took her out and I'm like, we're going to spend an hour in the neighborhood. So for 60 minutes, we just drive around our neighborhood, top speed 20 miles an hour. So we're just driving around the neighborhood and I'm like, Sophie, I want you to get a feel for it. I want you to get a feel for what it's like to be in the seat and know there's mirrors here. And the steering wheel, and then there's these knobs. I want you to become aware and alert. I want you to know what it feels like to slow down and speed up at a stop sign, or to turn right or to turn left, or when there's a car coming your way. What does that feel like? I want you to really be present in this moment. So she actually does phenomenal. I think she's got a little natural talent that she gets from me when it comes to driving. Yeah, I thought that'd get a laugh. Okay, so we're driving around. I'm like, you know what? I think she's up for it. So I'm like, let's go down Fortune and then turn onto Winchester Road. She does great. And I'm like, all right, well, let's hit Sir Barton and see if you want to go over to Starbucks and get a drink. So we spend about the next 2 hours just driving all around Hamburg, and she does a phenomenal job. So we're coming home, and we're going to do one of these crossroads where we're going to connect to a road called Liberty Road. So it's a little wet. It's been wet, and I'm talking to her about the rain and all this stuff. And I didn't realize I knew so much about driving until I'm in this passenger seat coaching this gal. So we're driving, and she comes to the stop sign, and it's time for her to turn right onto a bigger road. So she's got to give it a little gas and all this. So she turns right, and I'm sitting there in the passenger seat with, several tons of time experience with driving. And I know my way around a car. And like you, we feel it. We've been doing it a long time. There's not a lot of starting and stopping. There's some fluid motion. We know how to take a curve. We know when to speed up, when to slow down. We've got a feel for it. So much so that we know when something's off. You're not even feeling that things are right anymore. It just is. You now feel when something's off. So she turns onto this road, and the road she's turning onto, she's going to turn into the right lane, but the right lane ends really soon. So she turns on, and the road's a little wet, and she's just getting used to it. So it makes that little sound, like that, the wheel spinning a little bit, and she gets into the right lane, and then my mind just goes wild. and I go into teaching mode. And I don't know what teaching mode looks like a lot because it's just natural for me. Michelle calls it didactic. And she's like, don't get didactic, David. And I'm like, I don't even know what that word means, Michelle. Break that down a little bit. So I go into teaching mode and I'm like, Sophie, this lane ends and the road's wet. And then I catch something out of the corner of my eye, and I'm so glad I saw this. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Sophie reach up and grab the rearview mirror and adjust it. And in that moment, it hits me with such clarity. I've got a lot of experience driving. I know what to teach her. I know what to look out for. But in this moment, as a passenger, I have a blind spot. And Sophie in the driver's seat is so much more aware of everything going on than even I am, because from my angle, I can't even see in the rearview mirror, but she can. And then I look at what she does over the next 3 to 5 seconds, and I realize she's in full control. And she's looking behind her about the car behind her because she knows that the right lane ends, and she needs to get over. She has this 360 view, and I was so proud of her. She had vision in that moment that I didn't. That's a big deal, because there are some times when you're going to be in the driver's seat and you're leading and you see so much that the other people you're leading, they don't recognize, they don't see, even though they have tons of experience or awareness. Simply because you're leading this endeavor, you have a better view. So Nehemiah wants to go to Jerusalem, and he wants to rebuild this wall. That's in his heart and mind, and he knows it's from God. So he wants to really embrace this. The deal is, everybody there, they've been living this. Why didn't they rebuild it? It's just become the new normal for them. The wall's broken down. It's part of our history. It's part of what happened. And now it's defining them. So when Nehemiah enters Jerusalem, he does something that is so stinking important. And I'm so glad I caught myself, was able to reverse course in that passenger seat. He doesn't say anything. He gets to Jerusalem, and for 3 days he hangs around. He takes a small inner circle with him, not from Jerusalem, that had traveled with him. And he doesn't say anything to anyone about what God had put in his heart to do. He's silent. Isn't that amazing? And I think about the past 6 months with you and I being together, and I've had some conversations with some people, and I frame it up like this. I don't know about you. I assume and I hope that you're going to come through with me right now. But when I think about Madison Hills Christian Church, it feels so good right now. Is that me? You feel the same way? The vibe is phenomenal. We've got a great relationship going. I feel we've spent some time learning each other. Coffee, conversations over coffee. You coming to me for some pastoral care, for some advice. We've learned each other. We've got a good working understanding of each other. And it feels so good right now. And I feel that we've created something to where now we trust each other. And we can really start building on what we've created. Because it's not just going to be me. It's going to be we. It's going to be us moving into the future. Is that fair? Does that sound right? So imagine 6 months ago, I come in, I'm like, oh yeah, here's 3 changes we need to make, and it's going to cost $100,000. Where does that go? Nowhere. But what if I say, you know what? Based on who we are, and based on who we are over the past 6 months and what we've shared and what we learned about each other, it seems like God really wants us to be about this. And it's going to require this investment. I bet then you're ready to have a conversation. And I bet some of you are going to feel that immediately because of what we've created. So for 3 days, the guy says nothing. And then the text goes on, and you read this, it's chapter 2, verses 13 to 16. And he goes to these 4 different gates, and he enters through these gates, and he's just weaving in and out, looking and examining the wall. That's all he's doing. He's just taking inventory, understanding what's going on, listening to stories, watching how the people move and just move throughout this reality that they live in. He's understanding the culture, maybe listening to conversations and how people talk about their own lives and life in Jerusalem now that this has happened. Maybe he's listening to their hopes and their dreams and what they would like to happen, but they don't know how to make it happen. He's just assessing the situation. Isn't that amazing? And then the text goes on, he gets back from this little tour, and he does this at night. He gets back from this little tour, and he says he didn't tell anyone, and no one knew what he was doing. There's a little bit of built-in ambiguity by design. We don't know what's happening because it's a stage or a phase when we're learning what's going on. We're learning about each other. We're creating something to build on. We're creating an understanding. This is where Nehemiah is starting to form and fashion his vision. So he says, I didn't tell the priests, the officials, the Jews, and notice that last line, or anyone who is going to be doing the work, what I was doing. Because it wasn't time. The time was to get to know the area, get to know the people, so that when he presents this idea of, I want to rebuild the wall, well, then everybody's on board, because that's a shared direction. This is leadership at its finest by Nehemiah. So here's my ask of you this morning. And this one's not big, okay? This one's not big. It's not $100,000. All right, good deal. Here's what it is, though. I want you to spend the next several days in prayer. And I want every single one of you, as many of us as possibly can, to come back next Sunday. And we're going to call this our Vision Sunday. And we're going to come together and we're going to look at what Nehemiah does with these 4 gates and this rebuilding of the wall. Because over the past 6 months, and I've tested the waters a little bit in our town hall meetings, the elders and I have talked about this, and I've talked to some of you over coffee and over lunch about these too. But it's really interesting when you look at Nehemiah and these 4 gates that he looks at. And I'm like, what's the connection between a gate and a wall, and why these 4? And it seems like there are four core characteristics that you and I can build into at Madison Hills Christian Church that would really outline what it is we need to be about so that we can rebuild your individual lives. And in doing so, rebuild the life of this church. I want you to be in prayer about your role in that. Is that fair? The next 7 days, just spend some time saying, God, what we've been through the past 6 or 7 months, getting to know each other, having some events where we're building this family vibe that we have here. Our role, our presence in Richmond at 960 Red House Road. What is my contribution here? Because this isn't just a place where you show up and it's good to see you. We love seeing you. And we need you. You're here by design. So if you feel like you've dropped the ball, that's fine. If you feel like you're laying flat on the field, it's fine. If you feel like there's trouble and disgrace and it's broken down and things have been burned and the moment's been missed and you're never going to get it back, I want you to know it's fine. Because God is all about the redo. And that's the purpose of Nehemiah. So come back next Sunday. And we will do what Nehemiah does. We'll lay it all on the line. Does that sound good? So Nehemiah does this, and around verse 17 or 18, he tells them what's going on. He wants to rebuild this, and I love the response of the people. They replied because he spent some time doing nothing but getting to know the people, understanding where they should go and how they should rebuild this wall, because there's implications. You start rebuilding this wall, well, there's implications to that. That means something. So he presents this, and then the people say, let's start rebuilding. We're in. Gosh, I love that. We're in. I hear that from you. I hear that when we text. I hear that in emails. I hear that at Purdy's. I hear that at Starbucks. I hear it before and after service. Let's rebuild. And here's why I know it's true of you. We've got some great ideas on the line. We've got some cool stuff on the horizon. We've got some ideas that we think are just going to shape the mission and vision of Madison Hills Christian Church for the betterment of the kingdom. Not for our own ego, but to move God's ways and purposes forward at 960 Red House Road. This is going to be our way of honoring him because he's in it with all of us. And I think this redo could be for you one of the most God-honoring moments of your life. And I had a conversation with someone not too long ago because some of the things we're talking about, they do cost a little bit of money. And I had a conversation with someone who said, I'm going to donate. And I love this because it's going to frame up how we talk about money. We're not going to be a church who every week we just beat you down. Hey, we need money. Hey, this is how you give. We're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to create a community here where the people who are skilled in certain ways, and you're really going to see this in Nehemiah, when the people who are skilled to do this job, they help in this area. And the people who are empowered to do this help in this area. And the people with these resources help in this area. And that's the beauty of a congregation. That's the beauty of a church where each part is doing and performing its role, its function, the way that God brought us together. So there will be times, and maybe you're in a season right now where you literally can't give financially. And I want you to know from the stage, from my mouth, from my lips, locking eyes with you, if that's you, that's okay. If you feel like God is tugging in your heart to give out of where you're already stretched, that's one thing. But you're not going to hear us beat you down about giving. Instead, there are going to be people who step up because they have the funds and the resources to help in this way. Some of you are going to step up and help in this way because you've got the time. You're in this season of life. So I had a conversation with someone, and they know that one of the things we want to do is make sure that we have a solid online presence. Because some of you visit us online before you step foot on this property. That's the trend in America right now. So we want to make sure that we meet people exactly where they are. And if our first meeting with them is online, well, we want to make that a very helpful experience. So we're talking about some of the things we need to do with that. And this donor said, okay, well, around mid-January, early February, I'm going to donate $7,000 to help make this a reality. And my heart just grew 3 sizes too big and broke the frame. And I picked the sleigh up and was like, yes, oh my gosh, that's amazing, right? That is Madison Hills. People who are saying, I've got this, and here's what I'm going to do. That doesn't happen right off the bat. These people start rebuilding the wall. They catch Nehemiah's vision, and they go all in. And we'll see next week that everybody plugs in exactly where they need to plug in. And they step up, and they get this wall rebuilt. It's one of the most beautiful redos in all of Scripture. Isn't that amazing? Like $7,000. Here you go. Here's the need. I've got it. Boom. Madison Hills, I love you for that. Not because it's money, but because that's what's going on in here. You get it. You understand it. And that's what makes us Madison Hills. So, big ask. You be here next week, prayed up, ready to roll. You in? Father, thank you so much for a redo. And some of us, we do have that mistake that just messes with our minds. And some of us, we have the missed opportunity that we would give anything for one more shot. And some of us, we have We have that moment we'll never get back, and if we could, we'd do things so differently. Father, right now we give that to you. And we ask you in return to give us what we need, which is a clearly defined what. And a clearly defined mission or vision that lets us know precisely how we are a part of this thing you're doing at Madison Hills Christian Church. God, we love you, and we pray that our lives reflect that. And we know, and that's what we want to recognize, that you love us because of what you've done for us, even right now in this moment, which is offering us a redo. My prayer, Father, as the pastor here, is that we all get in touch with you through this series, and that we understand in whatever step we need to take, with it being prayer or being present next Sunday, or following up with me or someone else, taking that next step, Father, to make sure that we are doing the redo that you are making available for us. Father, thank you for what you do every day in our lives. As always, we recognize you in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.